Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to welcome you here to today's educational webinar. My name is Dr. Suzanne Sickner. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at ROWI. And like I said, it's a pleasure to welcome you all here. And it's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, which is Dr. Bryan Hixson. He's the Director of Neuroscience and the founder of Brain Performance Centers. It's one of the leading experts in quantitative EEG brain mapping and neurofeedback. As the founder of Brain Performance Center of Southern California, he has conducted more than 25,000 brain maps, helping children, adults, and families understand how their brains function and how to optimize them. His work bridges cutting-edge neuroscience with real-world applications, empowering people to improve focus, sleep, mood, and emotional regulation. These things are so important in today's world, and specifically understanding the impact of video games on children's brains is something that clinicians, parents, even kids want to understand a little bit better. So once again, it's a pleasure to welcome Bryan here today. Few housekeeping items. What we are going to be doing is during the, I will be exiting and monitoring the chat after Bryan's presentation. We're going to have a Q&A period of time. I really want to encourage you guys to use the chat, or there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to put your questions in. We'll make sure we get all the questions answered. If I find that we've got like a lot of questions that are basically the same, I will just narrow down and have one question that will cover everybody's question. I hope that makes sense. Lastly, you will be receiving a recording of today's presentation after the event is over. So thank you so much. And once again, it's a pleasure to welcome you, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, this will be fun. Let's jump in here. I'm going to share my screen here, which hopefully everybody can see now. And again, I'm the Director of Neuroscience at the Brain Performance Center here in Westlake Village. And we're going to look at video games and your kid's brain. I've done a number of research studies on this, and have a lot of experience with kind of what happens in here. So we'll take it from a couple different areas. First of all, just to kind of get started, just so you know kind of what our company does. We've worked with some of the top athletes in the world. We've been hired by Red Bull to help with this, this jump here that Felix Baumgartner did, from outer space basically down. We've done a lot of projects with them. We've done projects with let me get through there. There we go. Even with a lot of their athletes, they're snowmobiling, from snowboarding to skiing to big wave surfers. And actually, we've actually trained a lot of their esports athletes as well, which is more in the video game side. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. We've worked with the U.S. Army and Department of Defense, Special Forces, done a lot of training with some of the top guys in the U.S. Army as well. We've worked with a lot of athletes from collegiate sports to Olympic sports too, with from golf to pretty much every sport all the way across. But what I get most excited about is actually working with the average person next door. And, kids like Nick here, where we did a case study with him, a 6-year-old boy with attention deficit, hyperactivity, and all these things. And to be able to look at the underlying structure of the brain and what is causing some of those behaviors. I talk a lot about how many times the behavior that we're seeing is perfectly appropriate for the brain state that kid's in. They're just in the wrong brain state. So if you're in a fight or flight brain state, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, where your brain is firing away fight or flight waves, your fight or flight behavior is appropriate for that. But you shouldn't be in a fight or flight behavior. You shouldn't be in that fight or flight actual activity in the brain. And we're going to be able to see that and talk about that. So let's kind of get started here about your kid's brain on video games. And so I'm sure every parent has always wondered what is going on in their kid's brain while they're playing these video games, and what is it doing to their brain, right? What is it doing? How is it altering, changing? Why do we see these behaviors? What seems like addiction? Is it addiction? Is it not? What is going on? So we're going to jump into that right now. And, with this, There are actually, I take this from a little bit different approach from a lot of people because there's actually a lot of benefits. And we're going to talk about those first, but don't worry, we're going to get into the negative side as well. But I think it's important to balance this out and really looking at some of the benefits of video gaming. And video games are a cognitive stimulating activity, very much like a puzzle or playing Sudoku or figuring things out, problem solving, all these things. These are it challenges the brain. It creates new networks in the brain. There is definitely a lot of great things about video games that fall under this cognitive stimulating activity. The other thing here is it improves focus and visual motor skills. Now, again, this is certain types of focus, which we're going to talk about here. But if you think about with a video game, the hand-eye coordination, the visual motor, coordination that goes on between the visual and hands and being able to control, they're controlling up to 200 to 300 different events per minute in a video game. With this, and there's so much going on in the brain, it's challenging the brain a huge amount. That's why a lot of parents, if you try and jump on a video game, you're like lost, like what's going on? How do I do this? How do I change this? These kids, it's really an amazing skill set, and it's using a lot of the areas in the back of the brain. The occipital portion of the brain is all the visual motor, the motor strip that goes across the middle of the brain as well, and the hand-eye coordinations. So it is a lot of focus between that hand-eye coordination and visual motor type skills that are going on as well. Improves problem solving skills. These video games, they don't come with, when I was a kid, or younger, they came with a big manual of just trying to, okay, here's what you need to do, here's the goals, and everything. There's no manuals that come with this now. They just are thrown into these new games and they got to figure it out. They got to figure out where these certain secret, weapons or unlock certain levels and everything in the game. And it's very, very difficult problem solving, and these are excellent skills to learn in that kind of side of it, that problem solving skills, where you have to figure things out, trial and error. Can provide some social interactions. Key word here is some. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But there is some social side. I know that, a lot of kids say, well, this is where I'm able to talk to my friends, my friends maybe that moved across the country, or I know for my older son, when he went to college, he's able to continue to play games with a lot of his high school friends. And there is that kind of social side that it does provide as well, with this. Many jobs today involve gaming skills. This is important because, huge amounts of jobs from military, flying drones over places to all the different things that they do. We've seen it so many times. They do a lot of simulation training with gaming. Gaming industry is absolutely huge, multi-billion dollar industry. So getting jobs involved in that. Social media is all gamified most of the time. Even medicine, and the medical technologies where you're actually maneuvering these micro little electronics through the body with cameras to be able to look at certain areas and see where things are. Even doctors have to have a lot of this fine motor skill control that happens a lot through video games. Engineering, the whole CAD programs and building houses, and you have to use these game programs to test, and if an earthquake comes, would the structure support it, and all these things. There's a lot of great things that happen from gaming. Now, what I want to do before I jump into the negative side, or where I wouldn't even say the negative side, it's more the where we have to be careful side, where it can go to a negative, is it's important to understand kind of how the brain works. And once we have an understanding of how the brain works, we can see how it can kind of alter the brain. So just to give you a very quick, I'm just going to fly through this. There's other videos on our website and stuff if you want to see this in a lot more depth, but I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to fly through this real quick. Your brain has neurons in it, and they fire off at different speeds. You have different types of neurons. You've got at least these 5 different types of neurons, more, but these are the 5 that are more functional. You've got these delta neurons, and these delta neurons fire off very slow throughout the brain. You've got hundreds of millions of them throughout your whole brain. And when they fire off, they're going to fire off the most. When they're firing off the most electricity, when they're firing off a huge amount, that's usually when you're asleep. Okay. And so think of it as when you're awake, they're sitting there just kind of idling, and they're still regulating your immune function, digestive system, all those subconscious processes that just keep you alive. And then as you start to go to sleep, you produce more and you're in light sleep. And then you produce even more of these delta waves. You go into REM or dream sleep. And then as you produce even more, you go into this deep waves, or slow wave sleep, deep sleep, which you stop dreaming. And it's when your brain is cleansing out all the toxins, all the metabolic waste products, all the plaques and everything. These are things you produce during the day and you need to get rid of at night. You produce during the day and get rid of at night. So again, at the top, when you're producing the most of these delta waves, that's when your brain's cleansing out. Your body has a lymphatic system that gets rid of the waste products in your body, but your brain is the only part of your body that does not have a lymphatic system at all. So it uses the deep stages of sleep, the deep slow wave sleep, what we call the glymphatic system, to actually cleanse out the brain at night. So when you're not getting enough time in that deep sleep, you're not detoxing your brain. It'd be like your lymphatic system not working. So again, what I want you to think of is you're sitting there nice idling, these, producing just a little bit of electricity, just an idle, almost like your resting heart rate. And then as you start to go to sleep, it goes up more into first stage, second stage, third stage, and then it comes back down, and you go up and down through that about every 90 minutes, at least the first, few cycles of sleep, and it gets a little bit less as you go on. So those delta waves are super important. And then as you wake up, as you start to wake up and kind of come into consciousness, you produce these theta waves. Now, these neurons are always there, but they're usually just resting on idle. And then that when you produce a lot of these theta neurons, it makes you tired. Okay. This is great for transitioning from awake to asleep as you lay down for 10 minutes and you get tired, which then shifts you into these nice big delta waves and you go to sleep. Or as you're waking up, you're producing these theta waves. This is that first 10, 15 minutes as you're waking up and someone asks you a question. You're like, don't even talk to me right now until I get my coffee, right? That's these theta waves. You're shifting between asleep to awake. We all know those people that are in this state for 2 to 3 hours. It should be 10, 15 minutes. And then when you wake up, those theta waves should go down to a nice idle, down to a resting state with the delta. And then you start producing these alpha waves. Now, these are just neurons. They're firing off different type of neuron that's firing off at different speed. And these ones are when you're fully awake, but you're very present. You're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking about the past. You're just in this nice, present, kind of content state. This is very much what we want to do with mindfulness meditation, where we're just bringing our attention down to the present state. Very, very important for things for calming ourselves down. It's like the brakes on the brain. So when you take a big, deep breath, you produce these alpha waves and it calms you down. Then you can take on more stress, and then you take a deep breath and it calms you down. This is important to learn because this is, again, this is why deep breathing techniques are the brakes on the body, on the brain. Just like your brake on the car. You don't always use your brake on the car just to come to a complete stop. Sometimes you're going down the freeway and you just barely hit the brake just to control your speed. Just give you a little more control so you don't ram into that car in front of you. And same thing with these alpha waves, can just, even when you're having a lot of stress in the day, one deep breath can just bring you down a little bit and kind of keep you in that nice calm control state. So alpha is there. And then we want that alpha to go down, just like you want the brakes to go off your car as you're driving. And then you produce these beta waves. Now, beta is more like the gas pedal on the car. For the brain, it is every region of your brain does a different function. When it's producing beta waves, it's working. That region is working. Okay, think of beta almost like flexing a muscle. So, these beta waves are going up and down throughout the day, just like when you flex a muscle and relax a muscle. We don't want to keep this up all the time. That would be like keeping a muscle flexed all the time. But this should be going up at different times, different regions of the brain, depending on what we're doing. And then when we're kind of relaxing, beta kind of comes down. And this last one, high beta, these are our more fight or flight waves. These are specific neurons. We all have these neurons across our whole brain, and they're just sitting there idling. Right now, they're just sitting there idling. If a fire came into the house, those would go up and help you prepare for emergency. When they go up high enough, they trigger the full fight or flight response, which just stops you from thinking and you just, react. You just, escape. Think of it as kind of that escape route, that either fight or flee, right? And for some people, they can cause you to freeze too. But they're mainly supposed to be to fight or to flee away. And so these, again, we want at an idle state. So what should happen is all of these brainwaves, when you're resting, they should all come down to a nice idle. And then one should go up at a time based on what you're doing. If I want to meditate, these alpha goes up. If I want to, if I'm laying there in bed and I need to shut my brain down, I might even take a big deep breath and these alpha waves go up, which kind of stops my brain from thinking. And then I start producing these theta waves. They go up, which makes me tired. And then I start going into these delta waves. I go into light sleep and then from REM sleep, dream sleep, and then to deep sleep and go through that throughout the night and every 90 minutes. And then I come back into theta and I start waking up and I go back into alpha and I'm awake and then I get things done. Hopefully I'm not using this high beta that much unless there's an emergency. So I just want everybody to have a good perspective of what's going on in the brain. These are like gears in the car that are controlling your behavior. Okay. If high beta stays up, I am automatically going to be agitated, just like I would be if I knew that a fire was coming really close to my house. And I would be just on edge. My attention narrows, all these things. Okay, so we don't want that. We want these things to be at this nice resting state. We measure it through a brain map. And we can put an EEG brain map or an EEG cap and measure the activity. It's non-invasive. It's just like doing an EKG on your heart. And then that looks like this. And when we compare it to your same age and gender, where it should be for that age, we can look at those delta waves and make sure they're in the white and green. If they're in this normal compared to a normative database, that looks good. If your brain looks like this, that means everything's coming down to a nice resting state. That means you can choose, you're in control. You can bring one up at a time depending on what you're doing. Okay, that's what we want to see. So let's start here with the negative side of gaming. I think it's important that you have that little background first before we jump into this. So the negative side of gaming, one of the first things that can happen is addiction. Okay, this is absolutely true. We've shown it. We did a study with Johns Hopkins where we actually were able to show that it actually changes the dopamine pathway. So addiction is really when your brainwaves become dysregulated. So you can think of this as if these beta brainwaves, now these beta brainwaves should be a nice calm, and then they go up as you're engaging in an activity. And the more stressful an activity, they go up higher. And then when you stop that activity, they should go down. So think of these beta brainwaves as they should go up and down based on your situation. It's kind of like your heart rate. When I run, my heart rate goes up. When I stop running, my heart rate goes down. So we want those to go together. However, addiction occurs, one form of addiction occurs when those brainwaves get stuck. Now, if they're stuck up here, regardless of my situation, they're in a stress state, staying there. Now, what happens is when I'm actually performing a stressful activity, it actually feels normal because my brain is producing these stress waves, which is helping me with this stressful activity. It's kind of like when I run, my heart rate at 130 beats per minute feels fine. It's helping me run. It's matching my level of effort that I'm putting in there. Okay, so that would be fine. But if I try and rest and my heart rate stays at 130, I'm going to have a problem. I'm going to feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And that's the same thing that happens here is that when these beta waves, when we're doing something stressful, it feels normal. It's helpful. These are helping me get that done. It narrows my attention. It creates urgency. But then when I try and rest and my brain stays up, this does not feel calm. This feels calm. If my brain comes down with it, this is peace. This is calm. This is, just relaxing here. But when this stays up, I am not calm in this state. In fact, I am always wanting to go to this state because if I can't change my brain down to here, I will always want to go to where my brain is. Okay. And so this sitting around doing nothing, just relaxing meditation feels horrible with this because guess what? If I'm trying to meditate, my situation comes down here, my brain stays stuck. I'm not getting any of the benefits of meditation. In fact, my brain's just racing. And the bigger the difference between where my brain is and where my situation is where I'll feel anxiety. Anxiety occurs here, not here. That's why when we're doing something, when we're staying busy, we don't usually feel anxiety. But now when my brain stays there and I try and go to sleep at night, and I'm sitting down here doing nothing, and my brain's racing away, thinking of every single thought that doesn't matter at all, that I can't control, and I can't, even control my thoughts, I can't turn it off. That's where I have anxiety. So what happens with addiction is even when we're doing nothing, we want to be up here and we want to constantly be up here because this feels better. Okay. And, so with a kid, when they start, producing all these waves. Now, the way we produce all these waves and stay up here, I always explain it as kind of like if I had my arm in a cast for a year and I get the cast off, and think I'll be fine. No, I get the cast off and I've lost my range of motion. My ligaments have shrunk, my arm conditioned to this place because I was stuck there for a year, for a long time. Now, same thing. If I take a soldier, right, and put them in a war situation, so the war situation is way up here threatening, and my brain stays up there. Now, when a soldier's at war and their brain's been up here for a long time, even when it's stuck up there, as long as they're in war, no one's going to say they have PTSD because this doesn't feel like PTSD. This feels normal. We call this situational awareness. I'm using these brainwaves to detect threat, to watch out for everything. This is what's keeping me alive. But now, after 2 years, the brain's got stuck there, which feels fine when I'm in that situation. But now, when I come home and my brain's still there, that's where the PTSD kicks in because now my brain's still in a high threat detection mode, but nothing's going on around me. And I feel crazy. Okay. I feel like everything is triggering me. Okay. Now, for a long time before we had things like neurofeedback where we could train down, this activity in soldiers, what for the really bad guys, what we'd have to do is finally send them back to war. And when we would, it sounds bad, but they would be, oh, this feels normal. It feels so much better because at least my brain is matching. So think of that as addiction, is that when this stays up, I want to be doing the activity that matches that. Okay. And for these betas, this is a highly stimulating, okay, highly stimulating. Now, video games become so highly stimulating. And if I am watching that, and a lot of these are kind of war type games or high intensity sports competitive games, a lot going on. And when that high stimulation stays up for so long, sometimes hours a day, the brain will start to stay up. It starts to condition up there. And when I'm playing that video game, I feel absolutely normal. And now all of a sudden, when it's stuck, when I'm not playing the video game, all I'm thinking about is the video game. I can't even be calm in this state. Then, I get triggered so quick on things like I'm still in that state. Someone asks me something. And the other thing is I can't pay attention to things lower than this. Now, remember, video games way up here as far as stimulating. Now you try and think about a, fourth grade, fifth grade, teacher. They're way down here, right? Teaching me history is way down here, and I can't even pay attention. My brain's racing this fast. I can't pay attention here. So now I have to use distraction and think about other things. I'm reading and I'm thinking about 20 other things at the same time, and I can't remember what I just read. It's really an anxiety side where it's staying up so much that unless my activity is matching where my brain is, I can't even enjoy it. And then what happens is at this place, wherever your brain's starting point is, that is where you start producing dopamine. So that means anything below that is robbing me of dopamine. And I only get dopamine when I'm up here. Now, dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter that helps us, rewards us. So that means I'm only getting a reward when I'm up here. Anything below this, it's withholding dopamine, which makes everything else in my life horrible. I can't stand it. All I want to do is play video games that matches this. So that's where the addiction can really, cause a problem with certain kids. Overstimulation of fight or flight waves too. These again are these more high beta waves. These are more, think of high beta as at this point up here, when I get enough of these, I trigger my fight or flight. And when I trigger my fight or flight, I throw logic out the door. There's no logic in that limbic system in the middle of the brain. I throw logic out the door. I go everything by how I feel in the moment, and I go to worst case scenario. So that's where the explosive emotions, that's where you call them for dinner and you just, think you just injured them. They're just explosive and mad and angry. All those, again, would be great if someone was attacking them. The fight or flight is meant for that or to get away from some danger. But when they're this close, staying there all day long, like this red is 3 standard deviations high. That means that this kid here at rest is producing 99.9% too much fight or flight waves that they're this close to triggering. That short fuse that, if you tell me to get off the game, I explode. I lose it, right? And we wonder why it doesn't seem like a rational, logical, reaction. And it's not, because it's a limbic reaction. They just explode at that. They're not even in their cortex anymore. So, it can, just like I talked about with the PTSD with the soldier, it can trigger that limbic system, causing anger, rage, aggressive behavior. So again, the addiction side, this would just be for the more attention side, where I just feel like I need to be on it. But then this can cause more, again, that anger, rage, aggressive behavior that just stays up there. And it robs us of any pleasure on anything lower than this highly stimulating activity, which really robs us of all of life, because the majority of life is down here. If your brain comes down at rest to here, then when you do this, you get some dopamine. And you can enjoy the calm things in life, the relationships in life, just the peace, small events, doing small things that are not as stimulating. So it really robs us of that. It typically separates verbal and nonverbal communication. This is an important one, because a lot of kids will tell you, oh, this is, it's my social time, right? Same thing with like social media, all these things, right? Where we're, texting as well. So in any conversation, if I'm having a conversation with someone, the right side of my brain is paying attention to the right frontal is paying attention to all their nonverbal cues. These are things like, their facial expressions. Are they bored? Are they falling asleep? Are they interested? Are they mad at me? Are they, being sarcastic? All these things, even like tone of voice, all these things. It's paying attention to all those. That's 50% of a conversation. The other side is paying attention to the literal words someone says and getting my words back to them. Those both go into one conversation. We can't separate those, okay? It's one conversation. Now, what happens is you can overbuild one side or the other. And some kids actually have, higher amounts. Like if they have higher amount of activity on that right side, sometimes they have a little bit more social anxiety, because they're overlooking, they're over paying attention, paying too much attention to the nonverbal cues, right? That's someone that, maybe even gets a text that just says something and that they're like, oh, I think they meant this. Well, because they're reading nonverbal cues into just words, right? Because they're really interpreting everything from that right side if it's overdeveloped. And it can be more cautious going into social situations, which gives a little more anxiety. There can be some other things that happen with that. And then the left side, if that side was a lot stronger, well, then you don't recognize social cues as much. And so those are the kids that don't even, they have a hard time with social situations because they're not interacting correctly, because they're not seeing social cues. They're too close to someone, or not, if someone isn't interested in what they're saying, they don't notice it. They just keep talking, right? And so the problem with this, when it separates this in a conversation live, we're seeing both of those together. But when it separates us, and most of these games have mostly verbal communication, you're talking through a microphone as you're doing something to your friends back and forth, just like, maybe texting would, or social media. And the problem is, when you don't see someone and you're not recognizing the empathy, you're not recognizing that they're a person, and when you're face to face to someone, you don't say the same things as throwing out a text, because when you're not seeing that person, it shuts off all the empathy side, shuts off the caring side, and you just throw things out. And that becomes a problem. That's why so many of these kids are just yelling at each other, even their friends, they're just yelling at, some just say mean things. All these things, we can't control that a lot versus we would if we saw someone. And the problem is that can strengthen one side. So a kid that has more, social interaction issues is going to be drawn more to a video game, because I don't have to see that person. I'm almost role playing, becoming one of the characters in the game. But the problem is that keeps underdeveloping that, where really what they need to be is more with people, where they can start developing that side of the brain. So again, we don't want to necessarily, separate those. Content, this I could go into for a long time. And this kind of depends on a little bit your background, where you come from a moral standpoint and stuff too. But it can desensitize danger, crime, killing. A lot of these games, are about shooting people, and they can be very bloody and gory and stuff. And if you play it, I'm definitely not the type that thinks that every kid that plays a first-person shooter game becomes a school shooter. That's not true. But what it can do is desensitize. And if someone has already problems with the social side, if they have a problem with anger side, and they have a lot of other issues that are underlying, the desensitization can bring them up a notch, which could make them, be more dangerous. To things, and if it didn't even go to that extreme, it could be, something that, still they could hurt people more, or push people more, not worry about it, or even say something to someone and not have that empathy that goes along with that as well. So there's also the desensitization of when you just see this all day long without seeing the real life effects. When a soldier, kills someone, there's a real life effect that goes there, and it's not just this, killing everybody. It's a horrible thing for them that they have to deal with, and life is important because of that. So continue with this is also the loss of brain balance. So, one thing I talk about with video games is, video games, again, there's a lot of pros to it, but it would almost be like going to the gym and saying, I only want to work out my right bicep, just my right bicep. That's all I'm going to work out on. I don't want to work on anything else. Working out on your right bicep is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you only work out on that one muscle, it will make you uncoordinated, right? It lowers, it atrophies the other muscles. It makes that one only strong. So I'm only using the right arm, with that. And that can happen. The same thing is that even though there's some, verbal, social things, there's still the nonverbal, those live social interactions. It pulls us away from those and puts us more towards, again, the video games. It usually pulls us away from being outdoors and experiencing sensory things and calmness. It pulls us away a lot of times from exercise, kind of cooperation with others, like in team events where you have to have, coaches and discipline and teams and work together physically to do things. So, even though it is some good, it can throw us out of balance as well. And the last thing I'm going to talk about here is this poor sleep cycles. So, you saw in those delta waves have to go way up and down at night to actually cleanse out the brain, to detox the brain. And most of these video games, when you get kind of addicted to them, you start playing, a lot of them, especially in the later teenage years, they can go really late into the night. And it can throw off circadian rhythms. It throws off your whole sleep cycles. It starts limiting, those delta waves start staying up, which gives you these very shallow sleep cycles. And now, even when you're sleeping, if you sleep from 2 in the morning till, say, 10 o'clock in the morning, or, from 2 in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, you think, oh, I got 8 hours. But that disrupted sleep, for a lot of people, they're getting half sleep cycles. It's equivalent of basically getting 4 hours of quality sleep. So you're not getting all the detox going on. And it can really mess up the sleep side, which is another thing that's kind of an indirect part of the video games. So let's talk here in the last few minutes about how to help your child. Now you kind of know the pros, the cons. One of the biggest things that I've seen is when your kid sees a brain map. When you do a brain map for your kid, you don't know how many parents come in, we do a brain map, the kid looks at this and sees objectively that his brain is stuck producing 99.9% too high of this electricity. And they already know it inside, but this just, shows it, and it's objective. And they turn to their mom and say, Mom, maybe I need to, maybe we need to limit this a little bit. Maybe we need, maybe I need to not do it on the weekends, or during the week, maybe on the weekends only, or things like, and the moms are always like, I've been telling you this for years, why haven't you listened to me? Anybody that has kids knows parent or kids don't always listen to the wise words of every parent, right? And the parent also, a lot of times, are making generalized statement. Sugar's bad for you. No exercise is bad for you. This is bad for you. You should get good grades. You should, brushing your teeth is so important. All these things. These are great generalized things. But when there's so many generalized things, then we say video games, you need to limit video games. Why? Why do I need to limit video games? It's fine. It's not bad for me. It's fine. My brain can handle it. I'm fine. Everybody else does it, right? And so it's hard just with those generalized things. Where when a kid comes in, even, we've had even 6-year-olds come in, all the way through, 20 or 30-year-olds. They come in, and when they see this and they see what it's doing to their brain objectively, it makes a huge difference. They want to do something different because it validates how they're feeling, the anxiety they're feeling staying up. They know that the only time they're having fun when they're addicted is during video games, and it's robbing them of every other part of life. So seeing their brain map is so, so important. If there is brainwave dysregulation, if these brain waves are, these neurons are staying firing away all the time, there's really only two things that you can really do. If it's stuck, you've got to completely eliminate gaming. Okay, I've done many, many brain maps where we've gone around 60 days, sometimes it takes 90 days of just completely none and getting them outside and doing other things. And slowly, 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 the brain starts coming back down. It takes some time, but it takes a while depending on where it is. But you can't even do a little bit. A little bit still keeps bringing it because it's already stuck so high that it's not going to go down. It's staying there, and you're this close to triggering it. And even those little triggers throughout the day, and the dopamine dysregulation, it just stays without completely eliminating. It's really, when it's an addiction, it's very much like, AA, where you go and what do they say? You got to be totally free of it. You cannot have any. You can't say, well, I have an addiction. I'll go to AA. I think I'm just going to go and have a glass of wine once a week. That should be fine, right? No, you can't because anything causes more. It just feeds the addiction. And the only way to really get the brain down is to go at least about 60 days of absolutely no gaming. Again, this is for kids that have it stuck. If you see that, again, we do a brain map and it's stuck, we can do a brain map 60 days later. We've done it many times and it comes down. Okay, or at least comes down a huge amount where you can work with there. But some kids they don't have the addiction. They love it. It's something they love to do, but their brain's not stuck. It's going up when they do it, and then they stop and it goes back down. Okay, and so again, that's where that kid doesn't have an addiction. That maybe need to put some limits, but we don't need to take all video games away from that kid. But if we do a brain map and it is addicted, we can either do, 60 days complete absence, none, you can't touch the video games at all, or we can use something called EEG biofeedback, called neurofeedback, which looks like this, where we put a sensor on that red area. That area is staying up, put a sensor on it, and we can run it through a computer, see when those waves are staying up, and we can actually train it down. Okay. And the interesting thing about that is we actually use a video game to train it down. But think of it as I'm watching on maybe an iPad a car race, and only when my brain relaxes does the car go. And every time my brain activates, the car comes to a stop. So if I want to win the race and go up front, I have to learn to relax the brain and bring it down. It's like physical therapy for the brain. And I don't want to go too much into this, but it's an amazing thing that even while they're playing video games, you can train this down. And the cool thing is once that's trained all the way down, what you'll find is when you tell your kid to get off the game, they say, okay, all right, let me just finish. Just give me 2 minutes here and I'm off. And they get off. And they're not addicted anymore. They can shut it down. They're happy doing other things. They're producing dopamine because their resting state's here. So when they do an activity here, they're producing dopamine. It feels good. It feels great to, even study and get a good grade on a test feels good. To accomplish little things feels good, right? So, I spent too much time on that, but there's other things you can do besides just the complete getting rid of it. Balance gaming with calming activities. This is super important. Think of gaming as going to the gym and working out on a muscle. Now, the more you work out on a muscle, the more you need to stretch a muscle. Because if I just work out and work out, work out, work out, my range of motion is starting to get limited, right? Because the muscle's building and I'm not stretching, it's starting to get tighter and tighter. My joints are going to get injured. There's a lot of injuries that can happen if I keep putting more and more stress on my arm and keep building, building, building. So the more I want to build, the more I need to stretch. And the more I stretch as I build, it keeps that range of motion good and it doesn't injure me as I try and build that muscle. Same thing here, balance gaming with calming activities. And I usually tell parents, at a very minimum, try and do 1 hour of calm versus 1 hour gaming. You want to, let them need to earn it. A 1 hour calm activity, you can do an hour of gaming. Do 2 hours of calm activity, you can do 2 hours of gaming. First of all, that cuts their free time in half, right? To where they can't just do 6, 7, 8, 10 hours of gaming. it cuts it in half. But these calming activities, these more what's more like stretching to a muscle, is things like meditation. Now, a lot of kids can't do meditation depending on how old they are and stuff. So I give some other things like even like a nature walk, just walking, just observing, and even going with your kid and just pointing out things and observing and looking at different things. The problem is at first they hate this. These things feel torturous to a kid that gets addicted to video games because they're not getting any dopamine. Unless they get up here, that's when they're getting dopamine. You know what? A nature walk is here. It's super boring, right? But once that starts coming down, they can start taking pleasure in this and start calming their brain. Gardening is a great thing for that too. If your kid likes, growing, different plants or foods or things or herbs or anything too. Coloring, right? Coloring, drawing, painting, reading, all those type of things are very calm. And I'm not talking about painting or drawing necessarily on an iPad, just on paper, calming events but it's really good to kind of balance that with an hour and an hour, an hour, an hour, and it splits it up for them. Sports, get your kids involved in sports because it's self limits. When my 14-year-old back then, he's 21 now, was playing a lot of video games. We did a lot of this um, balancing activities and stuff, and which allowed him to do still very well in school and stuff while he was on his games. But after, and then he's involved in volleyball and club volleyball, but then, he got a job. And once he got a job, he started working at Chick-fil-A when he was 16. He started liking making money. He started actually, learning how to converse with other people, how to talk to people, and even the employees that at the job there too, and as well as people as ordering and stuff. But it took up a lot of time, and he was making money, and it limits the gaming, which is a great thing. Keep your kid involved. The more bored they are, the more they're going to play video games. Limit time gaming without destroying relationships. Huge one here. The problem is that a lot of times we'll say, okay, yeah, maybe from 6 to 8, no video games. Okay, that's dinner time. We're going to do some homework and stuff. 6 to 8, no video games. Now, the problem is as parents, we're not always the most consistent. And when I have a lot of experience with this, with my, again, back when he was 13, 14 years old, my son, I would tell him, okay, it's 6 o'clock. We said, no video games. And what you get is, Dad, I'm right in the middle of a game. I just started. We have a team. This is an event. This is all. I mean, they just go irate. I mean, any parents probably heard this before, and stuff like that. I can't stop now. I can't do all this stuff. And you're the bad person. If you tell them, first of all, you start getting mad at them because they're getting mad, and you just escalate up, and you finally win, but they hate you, and they finally come to dinner and they're mad, and you're mad, and it just kind of wrecks relationships. So one thing that I did that worked extremely well is I finally went in and programmed my Wi-Fi router, which anybody can look up how to do this on the computer on any router, and you can program it to automatically shut off between 6 and 8. And then is what I did is I took a piece of paper and typed on it. His name's Preston. Preston, just so you're aware, the Wi-Fi turns off between 6 o'clock every night and 8 o'clock. And I put that on his door and I made him initial it. So I knew he knew he said, I said, okay, you know this. I'm not, even when I am not home, it's going to shut off between 6 and 8 every single day, consistently, no matter what. You understand this? Oh, yeah, Dad, yeah, okay, whatever. That's not fair, but okay, whatever. So the first time it goes off, he is right in the middle of a game yelling at Dad, what just happened? The whole Wi-Fi just shut off. And I said, well, I didn't shut it off. You knew it was going to go off. Yeah, but I was right in the middle of the game, all this stuff. It only took about 2 days of him kind of still upset about it. By the third day, it was about 5:30, and I heard him in his room telling his friends, no, no, guys, I can't start another game because the Wi-Fi goes off at 6 o'clock, and I don't think I'd be done by then. We'd be like right towards the end of it, and it'd go off in the middle. And so, no, I can't right now, but I can come back on after 8. Now, that was beautiful. I was not the bad guy. He learned it was perfectly consistent whether I was there or not, and consistency is the name of the game, and I wasn't blamed. And he came out and wanted to do something with me. I wasn't the bad person. He knew it happened automatically. I highly recommend people look into that if you can. And one of the last things here is protect their sleep. Do not let your kid play till 2, 3 in the morning. That's just, whether they're addicted or not, they can't. It ruins their sleep habits. We do so much neurofeedback just because of poor sleep, throws off attention, creates anxiety, creates all these issues. So try and not do that. If you want to see any more of this, I did just write a book called Train the Brain, Transform a Child. Not trying to plug the book, I actually barely make any money on the book. However, if you want to look at that, you can get it on Amazon. It's like 10, 12 bucks. And it covers a lot about what we talked, but it also covers a lot of these other types of things. And it's kind of interesting because the way I write each chapter on these different conditions is it talks about kind of how, brain mapping and neuroscience and neurofeedback work and how that works with therapy. Okay. Therapy retrains behaviors out, retrains stuck patterns and stuff like that. But therapy cannot always change physiology. When physiology is stuck so much, then the best therapy can do typically is help manage that. Okay, which is great. It helps manage it. However, when you use, neurofeedback and we change some of those physiology, how those neurons are firing, and they can calm down, that's when therapy can work so much better because you're not working against the physiology, you're actually just learning the new strategy of how to control your brain. And so there's every one of these conditions really talk about how therapy works with physiology, and both these work together to really help improve a lot of these different conditions. So that is all from me. So I think we're going to do question and answer time. I think we got right on time there.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I want to just stress how much I appreciate your last statement there, talking about that there is the behavioral and the therapeutic interventions, but sometimes we reach a level to where we have to address the physiological inputs and how that is actually like a lasting intervention. It's not just something that is going to happen in that acute moment. And so I just want to thank you for that because I consider what we do with the behavioral interventions and the family interventions and talking about it and creating a system to where, we learn to tolerate the distress, but sometimes we really have to bring in, the big guns and address the physiological stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
So having said that, we have a lot of really great questions here. One that I'm seeing right now that I was actually going to ask you myself as well. What about, does this also apply to kids that are using social media and their phones all the time? Or is that what I love how Roman says, is that a different beast altogether?
That is not a different beast. It's the same exact beast. It's really highly stimulating activity, and that you don't go down. If you think of social media, even like no kid is on Facebook anymore because Facebook is not stimulating enough,
For
right?
old people.
Exactly. And the reason is because it's too calm. It's not fast enough. I
Mhm.
need to flip through, TikTok, even Instagram. Most kids don't even like anymore as much because it's not fast enough. TikTok is just flying through. And what we're doing there, and I put kind of social media, video gaming, and platforms like YouTube all in the same category because YouTube is everything, even when they're good moral type things. Like, I have a 9-year-old daughter right now. And, probably when she was 6 or so, we let her have some YouTube, watch some YouTube on her, her little TV there and her iPad. And, and these were all good, moral, great, no problem type shows. But they're so fast paced that what happened within 3 months, she could not watch a regular Disney movie. Now, in a regular movie, you have the downs and you have the ups, and you have character building time, and then you have the high hit point, and then it goes down. You have to learn to go through that, right? Where in like YouTube, it's all the high points, just boom, 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 so fast that it raised her level of stimulation to where she had to have this much stimulation before she was interested. And she'd start watching a movie and in 5 minutes be turning it to the next movie, 5 minutes turning it to the next
Oh,
movie.
wow.
I took away all the YouTube for her. And within a few months, she loves movies now. She'll watch the whole movie and then watch another movie, and some of these are very boring, kind of long-term buildups. But it's so important for our kids and us. And, a lot of this we talk about, the kids. It's us adults too, right?
Right.
Is that, when we have no downtime. And we need that downtime. So the social media, the problem is, especially on the phone, the video game at least is only for most kids, like, big video gamers usually when they have their big computer or console. Problem with the phone is I have it everywhere. And there's
Everywhere you go. Yeah.
everywhere you go. There's
Yeah.
no downtime at all. And kids call boredom today torture. And the problem is boredom is where so much creative expression happens. That's the more that's like saying stretching is torture. I only
Mhm.
want to go build muscle. I hate stretching. And we all do, right? I mean, it's true. We don't like necessarily to stretch all the time. But when we do, and that muscle's way down, it's nice and released and stuff, and it feels calm and relaxed, it feels good. And that's, that when we come down off those things for a period of time, it helps reset our brain and not stay up there all the whole time.
Well, you think about like any kind of nervous system regulation, like being dysregulated is not like never being dysregulated. It's like learning how to tolerate and
Exactly.
learning how to like get your nervous system back into a state of relaxation. So it's kind of the same thing, but with the neurotransmitters. This is awesome.
Exactly the same thing.
Kind of drafting on that story, we have a lot of questions with regards to, okay, I understand that the limits are important, but then I have like these young kids becoming rageful when I take things away.
Right.
So from a standpoint of like, I know at ROWI, we have to deal with this quite a bit too, and do the behavioral interventions and do, media management plans with the family where everyone has input. I like what you were talking about, how you kind of externalize the bad guy by putting a sign in your son's door and initial it, let them understand that them's the rules.
Right.
And so, with regards to the rageful piece, what are your recommendations with regards to just coping with the rage when you take something away?
Right. What I've seen is there's rage and then there's rage, right? There's
Yep.
rage of, oh, I don't like this,
Hmm.
and that's where sometimes it's tearing off the Band-Aid. Sometimes it's like, and that's where a lot of times it has to be nothing maybe on weekdays. And you get maybe on weekends, or if it's really bad, nothing at all, to where it will be rageful for a couple days. And I mean, I'm telling you, everybody that has done this when their kids have just been this rage, it's if you take it away, it's only 2 or 3 days.
Hmm.
If you try and limit it little tiny bit, that rage just continues and continues and continues.
Yeah.
It never goes away, right?
Yeah.
And that's where if someone's going to do like neurofeedback, what I tell them is, with neurofeedback, every time a parent comes in with a kid that has a lot of rage, I tell them, don't take away the video games. Actually, let them continue exactly where they are, and we will put a sensor on that area. And a couple times a week, we can train down that area. The video games only barely bring it up. We're training it down a lot more powerful with this. And as we get it halfway down to almost down, then
Then you can
take it away
intervene.
or
Yeah.
limit it because
Yeah.
then they won't have the explosive rage. It'll be
Mhm.
more like, oh, I don't really want, all right, okay, they can handle it. A lot of times if your kid has that underlying addiction where it's built up in the brain, taking away a video game and this sounds funny, but it's true. This is like taking away a drug from a drug addict.
Oh, I agree. I see it. It's interesting is like when we have kids in our programs, we take their phones away, and it's very rare that somebody's really pushing back and getting bananas about their phone. And it's funny, the parents are like, "How did you do that?" And we're like, "Because we just do it, and
Right,
that's it." We're not getting involved in like the tit for tat.
yes,
I heard you mention that before, and it's just like, and if you're not playing tug of war,
right,
there's no tension there. So
right.
I get that.
And when you do it also,
Yeah,
all of your kids are like that, right? So they're
that,
in an environment, it's not like you're in an environment where you're the only one, right?
right.
And this is hard with families too,
We're all
because,
miserable together without our devices. And
right,
that's, you brought up a really good point too, and I see this in a few questions, so I want to maybe address it, is that the parental habits are
right,
also extremely important,
yes,
and trying to enforce the connection.
yep,
Is like if everybody's in their corner doing their little thing in their little algorithm in their little world and not like having eyeball contact, then
yep,
it's going to be very difficult to enforce the rule
right.
for them to as well, because we're not actually not available to them. So
That's exactly. And you know this as well as I do, and we're all guilty of it. So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. We're all guilty. I'm guilty of it with my kids too. That a lot of the reason why our kids play so much video games is because we want time to ourselves.
We're busy doing
We're
something else.
busy
Yeah.
doing our own thing. I don't
Yeah.
have time to entertain you right now. So
Mhm.
yes, get on that and do that, right? It's kind of babysitting. And then that starts building this up, and then we wonder how it got there.
There's a lot of questions that are centered around time limits. And from a standpoint, I really like when you were talking about sort of like you think about life is about balance. And if we're going to have kids that are being employed, you don't go and just get a paycheck for doing nothing, right?
Right,
You have to there's input for the output.
right,
And so I think from a standpoint of like, I think it'd be very difficult. Everybody's neurobiology is different, everybody's family culture is different, but just something I really liked how you were identifying like, okay, an hour of sort of like nature time or, you know, device-free time where we're
right.
connecting, we're
Yeah,
doing other things. And once we do that, then we earn that
exactly.
time, and there's
Right,
limits to that time.
right.
Is it at all, do you recommend specific, okay, for like the 4 to 6 year olds, we don't know screens, or do you have any recommendations, or do you leave that up to the individual family? What,
Yeah.
what would your recommendation be?
When I get this all the time from parents, right? Like what's the best thing for it? And what I always tell them is the position I take on this
Mm.
is similar to sugar.
Oh,
All sugar's bad. Okay,
yeah,
all refined sugar's bad.
yeah,
But do you not let your kid go to any birthday party? Do you
yeah.
not let them do this? Do you not? No, I don't. I'm not going to take away all sugar from my kid. I'm going to restrict a lot of things, maybe like sodas and candy at home and a bunch of things so they can have some things, little things at home and do some things once in a while, go to Halloween, have candy, whatever. Those things, aren't as bad, right? So it's really kind of about this balance side. The absolute best thing would be to not let your kid probably have a phone till they're 16, 17 years old. Are
Yeah.
we going to do that? I mean, that's hard.
I actually did that, little FYI. I have a 26-year-old and he did not have a phone until he was much older. And
That's
he kind of hated me for it, but now
exactly. And,
yeah.
and then it comes down to now the parent that's picking up their kid late. Now I can't call my kid and tell him I'm picking him up late. Now, like communication and stuff too, right? So they're like, well, my kid needs a phone. But then once they have a phone, then they have this and stuff too. And, you know, like for my 9-year-old, she only has an Apple Watch. So she has an Apple Watch that has a phone in it, but we can restrict the phone numbers. We can restrict the texting. She can't operate any games or anything. I can actually restrict even the time during school time. It has a thing where it locks it down, can't do anything. It's
Mhm.
very restrictive, but it's communication if she's doing something. And I can track her with GPS if she's, with another family, I know, okay, they picked her up, they did this or whatever. So, those are things that you can kind of balance. But the longer you can go with your kid without a phone, especially, even like an iPad, you can restrict that a little bit. It's bigger, you don't carry around everywhere. The phone can get so out of control so fast. I'm not getting my daughter a phone till at minimum 16. If I can go further, I will. But absolutely, my wife and I are for sure not going to do it before
Sure.
16.
There's an interesting, Cyrus Galvin brought up this point, which I get that a lot of people ask me this question as well, is like, um, is there a way to control YouTube or TikTok showing inappropriate videos? And that is a real difficult thing to control.
Right,
And do you have any recommendations about the filtering? Because I know you were talking about, I found out how to like turn off my Wi-Fi. I can control those things.
right.
Any recommendations outside of ChatGPT that tell us how to do everything?
Yeah, I mean, there's YouTube Kids, right? And
Okay.
YouTube. So
Mhm.
depending on your age, like YouTube Kids is really fine for like kids 10 years and younger. As you get more into the age years, they're not going to like the YouTube Kids. They're looking more for the other content, but then that other content can go completely inappropriate.
Mhm.
Um, you know, there's I'm sure there's ways, to control some of it, but realize we're talking about two things. You're talking about maybe morally inappropriate content for our kids, and
Mhm.
then we're talking about maybe morally appropriate but too high stimulating.
Yeah.
Both can be bad. And there's no way, there's no algorithm that's going to say, I mean, the only algorithm for YouTube that stops high stimulating content is no YouTube at all.
There's no YouTube. Yeah,
Yeah,
there was somebody that put in the chat like, any shows, and I think that there's probably not any shows on YouTube because that's not the business model, really.
it wouldn't make it. It
Yeah,
wouldn't go viral. It wouldn't.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I always compare it to it'd be like, if a sports fan watched just the 3-minute recap of the football game so much that they couldn't even watch a football game. I get so
Right.
bored with football games now. I only want the three
Right, the
minute
highlights.
touchdown, this, that highlight.
Yeah,
And it ruins our ability to enjoy life. Life needs to be enjoyed at a low level. You'll have so much more excitement, reward in life if you do this than when you get up here. You're eliminating 99% of life that you're not going to enjoy for the 1%. And
yeah,
that is causing addiction.
yeah. Really interesting question here. We have time for two more because it's at one, but we can go a little bit over. Are you okay with going a
Yep.
little bit?
Yep.
So after successful neurofeedback treatments and the brain is brought back to like a normal baseline, is there ever a chance that the brain can go back to abnormal state? Or do we recommend sort of like mop-up sessions or ongoing therapy just to keep things in check? Like what would you be
So
a general treatment plan?
yeah, so the way I usually answer that with neurofeedback is, like a lot of people say, does it stick? Does it stay?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I always say, well, it's like physical therapy. So if my job was lifting heavy boxes all day long, and because of that, I start to injure my arms, and I stop my job, I go to physical therapy and I get fixed, but then I go back into my same job doing the same thing, I will
Right,
probably be back at that physical therapist, right? So if
right.
you get off and you have no restrictions at all, to me, neurofeedback brings it down so that now you can put a plan in place without your
Mm,
kid going
mm,
irate. You got them off the drugs,
mhm,
right? They're not addicted anymore. Now
mhm,
you can put a plan in place that they can agree to, that can stick with, that won't allow them to get back addicted. But if
mhm.
there's no plan in place and they just keep playing and playing and playing again, eventually the brain could go back to that state.
Alyssa said something in case you need to hop off. We are going to send you the recording, and yeah, and just encourage you guys to watch this with your children and your families for information. One question as well, I just want to clarify something. I've Danielle Thomas said when the reaction of a 6-year-old to scheduled timed Minecraft gameplay results in breakdowns and even self-hitting, this is due to dopamine dropping. And if so, how can this be managed to avoid the response and create balance that allows him to play the game?
Okay, so now when is he hitting himself and stuff? Say that question one more time.
When the game is being taken away or there's
Right,
been like trying to set limits, is
right.
this due to the dopamine dropping or is it the dot?
Well, it's not necessarily due to the dopamine dropping. The problem is that when they're doing some aggressive behavior like
Mhm.
that, they're triggering their limbic system. So
Yep.
now the problem is that what you should do is we should all be sitting here and our limbic system, our high beta waves should just be idling. Here is where we trigger it. Okay.
Mhm.
And it should take someone attacking me or a fire coming into my house at night before I hit up here. Most of life, even normal stresses should do this, which doesn't even feel bad. It's just,
Mhm.
it's a little urgent. I better get that done. Now, the problem is a 6-year-old that has that, and we see this all the time, is a 6-year-old that their resting high beta waves are here.
Okay.
Now, when they start out here, taking away the game does this reaction. Now, I always
Yeah.
tell parents, it's the same reaction. It's here to
Yeah.
here, taking away a game. I don't want to, and it goes to here, but this I can handle. This triggers my limbic system. Now, the
Yeah.
limbic system, when it is fully triggered, there's three things that really kind of define it. First of all, logic's out the door. There's no logic in the limbic system at all. You can't have a rational thought at all. Number two, it's all based on how I feel. It's my emotions, how I feel in the moment. Now, how I feel in the moment, if a parent yells at a 6-year-old, the 6-year-old feels like the parent hates them in the moment. And then the cortex has to say, no, 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 my mom, dad do everything for me. I know they don't hate me. That's not true. It has to push back. So if I throw out logic, if I go by how I feel in the moment, and the limbic system goes to worst case scenario, okay, which all are helpful if a fire or emergency, where I have to escape. But when that happens, when you say you have to get off the game now, and you release that, you are releasing the same thing that if someone was attacking that
It's
kid.
attacking them, so they're going to fight back. Yeah.
Right. And what parents do is they start to escalate consequences, right? And the problem is when you're in your limbic system, you don't even rationally think about consequences. It won't matter. You could throw a million consequences at a kid in their limbic system, and they won't care one bit. They will continue going up and fighting, right? It's only when they come back down out of their limbic system and more in their cortex that they can think, gosh, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that.
Timely question because somebody said, what's the best time to talk to my child about this issue? Clearly not when they have a controller or their phone. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and for the reasons that you just stated, they're not going to be activated or in a fight or flight or a
Right.
floppy stance or something. It's like when you're connected to their child.
Right.
Another strategy is like when you're not in, I call it the scene of the crime, like,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
always kind of maybe to a preferred place or something
Yeah.
that like has good feelings around it. Yeah.
One thing, if you got just 2 minutes, I'll just add this
Yeah.
because I think this is helpful. Is that, when parents bring their kids in to me, they're always like, oh, my kid's addicted to this, and the kid's sitting there like this.
Mhm.
And I always start with, well, actually at 13, my son was a professional gamer. And they're like, what? And I tell them the story. My son came to us at 13 and said, Dad, I want to stop my club volleyball and play
Professional gamer.
gaming full
Yeah.
time. Now, first response was, do you know what I do? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. And then my older son came in like, Dad, no, he's really good. You don't understand. There's already a sponsored team that wants him to play,
Oh, wow.
this Fortnite thing and stuff too. And so my wife and I talked about it, and finally we said, okay, it's so important to you. And if you're that good, what we'll do is create some balance here. So you can play for this much time, but you have to, we enrolled them in at that time, it was the Mamba Academy over there, and they had a whole program for like called esports where they actually did
Yeah.
all these exercises
Oh, yeah.
to offset. And the guy that ran it would tell them about, hey, this exercise is going to help you in this part of the game and this. And I mean, they did yoga to help offset sitting in the chair. I mean, my kid would come home and I'd say, hey, I'm just going to run by, say, Sharky's and grab you something. Dad, I have a tournament tomorrow. I need some high protein. This guy that was there, he told me about my diet, how it changes my ability to focus. I love that. When you start tying in exercise and these other things into making you a better video gamer, Red Bull paid us $200,000 to train their video game
Their
team.
video game
Now,
kid. Yeah.
yeah. Now, when you start bringing up your electricity in those beta and high beta waves, it narrows your attention.
Mhm.
And it's like having a laser pointer for attention, okay? Which means it's really bright where you're going. You can fixate on things. And when kids start doing that, they start having more rage and stuff too, but they also fixate their attention on the center of the screen where the action is. My son said, one thing we had him do is he had to do 2 sessions of neurofeedback a week to to make sure he was staying in a calm state as he was practicing activating his brain back and forth. But he said after he did the neurofeedback and he did these meditation practices and stuff, he said, Dad, I felt so much calmer playing the game. It opened up my vision. I
Oh,
was
wow. He was better.
reacting to people on the side as they were coming in and like my gaming got better. So, sometimes we kind of really tell a kid like, hey, you're getting so addicted, it actually makes your gaming worse. If we
Mhm.
can train these things here, not only will you be better at gaming, but you're also more flexible where you're not so rigid, where you're not so fixated, where I can stop now. I can do something else. And my son made a couple $1,000s a month,
Oh,
in
wow.
gaming. He played at the Anaheim Convention Center on TV for $250,000. He was
Wow.
a excellent, excellent gamer, but he also got a 4.2 at school, grade point
Good.
average. He's in college right now. And when he got a job at Chick-fil-A, partway when he was 16, it self-limited him. He
Yeah.
started working, he wanted this, and it's like, yeah, I like playing, and he kind of just stopped kind of his own. He still plays once in a while, but he's not addicted at all.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing. That's where I think to start, a
The
lot of
balance.
parents are like, you got to, video games are the devil. No, start with, there's a lot of positive things. And I want you to be able to play this, and I want you to be really good at it. But let's train your brain to get better at the gaming. And guess what? When you get better at the gaming, parents, you get better at flexible
That's a
thinking,
flexible
at
thing.
doing everything
Yeah.
else too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I could talk to you for 1,000 years.
mhm.
but we clearly don't have that. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I think that Elisa, that is helping me out here, is going to pop up some things on the screen about how you can reach us.
Okay.
And thank you so much. And thank you for everybody
Absolutely.
attending. And reminder, the recording will come, and reach out to us if you need anything.
All right. That
All
was
right.
great. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so
having
much.
me.
All right.
All
A
right.
pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.